Welcome to the Vibrantly You podcast. We're your hosts, Megan Martineau
and Caitlin Cipriano. In this podcast, we talk about fitness and nutrition on your motherhood journey. Whether you are trying to conceive, pregnant, postpartum, or beyond, you are welcome here.
Nothing is off limits, and our goal is to support you in this important season of life so that you can feel vibrantly you. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. Please see the show notes for more details. Welcome back to the Vibrantly You podcast. Today I am doing a solo episode and I'm going to be talking about my 3-step framework for effective birth prep. So I am both a pre and postnatal fitness specialist. I am a pregnancy and postpartum corrective exercise specialist, and I am also a birth doula. So a lot of my doula work with clients also includes a lot of birth prep. And birth prep is what I am doing with a lot of my fitness clients if I'm working with them in pregnancy. And so taking my education and experience from both a fitness lens and a doula lens, I have created this 3-step framework. It is called the Vibrant Birth Framework. So everything that I do in both my one-on-one online coaching for pregnancy and in my in-person doula work, I am thinking about this framework when it comes to helping you get ready for birth. So we're going to dive right into this. I don't want this to be a super long episode. I want it to be very tangible for you to have some really clear takeaways and know how to structure your own birth prep if you are in a season of pregnancy and looking ahead to birth. So number 1 is core and pelvic floor coordination. So core and pelvic floor get a lot of attention, obviously, in pregnancy and postpartum. So we want a healthy and functioning core and pelvic floor in pregnancy because this is going to make your pregnancy experience more comfortable, hopefully help with less aches and pains and discomfort. Your pelvic floor also, when you are in birth, is responsible for lengthening and relaxing to make space for baby to descend through the pelvis and be born. So during pregnancy, we want to learn how to coordinate the core and pelvic floor with the breath. And in addition to that, we want to learn how to relax the pelvic floor muscles. It is a myth that the pelvic floor pushes the baby out. A lot of times people will focus on Kegels and trying to get their pelvic floor as strong as possible in pregnancy, thinking that that's going to help them with pushing. And that is in fact not true. So step 1 for the pelvic floor, coordinate it with the breath. We do this through 360 breathing. I talk about this all the time on the podcast. But 360 breathing is on the inhale breath. We want to think about the rib cage expanding 360 degrees. So to the front, the sides, and the back. The belly is expanding at the same time, and pelvic floor is lengthening and lowering. And then on the exhale breath, pelvic floor slightly lifts and contracts. Your belly comes in, that rib cage closes down. This also helps to regulate the pressure in your core. So that means if you are doing this type of breathing when you're lifting, for example, say you already have a child, you're pregnant, you go to squat down and pick up your 2-year-old. If you are exhaling and bracing your core as you go to lift your toddler, you are controlling that pressure in your core canisters. We also call core and pelvic floor your core canister. But when you're controlling that pressure well, we don't have downward pressure on the pelvic floor, which can cause pain. It can cause things like pelvic floor dysfunction and prolapse. So we do want to be managing that pressure well. Again, we do this through the breathing technique. So learning how to coordinate that core and pelvic floor, really, really important in pregnancy, because then if you also know how to contract and relax your pelvic floor muscles, it's so much easier for you to intentionally relax your pelvic floor when it comes to those last few weeks of pregnancy as you're getting ready for birth. And then, of course, when you are in labor and pushing, you now have that mind-body connection of how to connect to your pelvic floor and how to actively release those muscles. So that is step 1 in my Vibrant Birth Framework is core and pelvic floor connection. Number 2 is strength and stamina under load. So one thing I talk about all the time is that labor is a marathon. I do have a podcast episode where I talk more in depth on that. That is episode number 41. So I will link that below in the show notes. You can go back and listen to that. But labor is long for many people. If you have a short labor, You're very lucky. But labor is long, and so it requires endurance and stamina, both physically and mentally. And so, what we want to do in pregnancy is to work on building strength and stamina under load. So, this means building that strength and stamina with weight training, doing isometric holds, something like a wall sit, but repeatedly exerting effort while fatigued. Because if you can do this well in pregnancy and you mentally can handle this and adapt to it, it is going to translate to your birth space because your body physically is already trained for it. So you're not going to get tired if you are in a long early labor phase, and you mentally are more prepared because you have now trained your body and your mind to know that you can do hard things. You can be exerting physical effort and keep going. We're really trying to build up that capacity in pregnancy to have it translate to your birth space. Because when you are in that birth space, you will get to a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I am so tired. I can't do this anymore. And the reality of the situation is you can't quit, right? When you're in labor, we've got to keep going. So if you have really worked on physically and mentally training during pregnancy, that is going to help you so, so much in the birth space because you're able to remind yourself, like, I am strong and I can do this. So this is something that I work with clients a lot. And we do this through something called LIT, which is labor intensity interval training. We obviously cannot mimic contractions exactly in pregnancy, but we can do a lot to, again, train the body to be exerting effort, to be in discomfort, and to keep going. So that is a really big part of birth prep. The third and final step of my vibrant birth framework is mobility. So, mobility is not the same as stretching. I know I've talked about this before. I talk about this in episode number 57, where I talk about strength versus stretching in pregnancy. But mobility is more moving through full range of motion. It is about mobilizing joints, looking at different planes of motion. So, making sure your body is not just in that sagittal plane, but also working in the frontal plane and transverse plane. So we are moving in all different directions and also thinking about the types of positions that you want to have access to in labor. So these can be things like external rotation of the hips, internal rotation of the hips. A lot of people have hip tightness, and especially in pregnancy. And so if we are not working on that in pregnancy and trying to increase that range of motion, learn more about your specific body of like what areas are tight, where do I, need to focus on to get more range of motion when you're in the birth space and, maybe baby is not descending, you're still at -2 station, baby's high in the pelvis, or you're not dilating because baby can't put enough pressure on your cervix, and we're trying to move in different positions to help baby rotate through, but your body can't move in that way. That is just limiting. And so we want to try to avoid that as much as we can. And we do this by practicing a lot of different positions in pregnancy, learning what works and what doesn't for your body, and tailoring our focus appropriately. So this is hugely important and also helps you feel more confident going into your birth space because if you know that your body can move in a variety of different ways, like you are not limited by how your body moves, again, it gives you so many more options when you are in labor and even for pushing. And so this is really, really empowering, which is why it is the third step in my birth framework. So like I said, I wanted to try to keep this episode short and sweet, but that is my vibrant birth framework. So these are the things that I like to focus on in my one-on-one online coaching clients. So that is for online exercise coaching training for birth prep and pregnancy, and what I like to work on with my in-person doula clients. So I don't just provide in-person doula support, I'm incorporating a lot of birth prep and movement into my doula packages. So if you are in the Raleigh area and that is something you are interested in, please reach out. I am taking on clients for the fall at this point in time. I'm recording this episode in April of 2026. So if you have a due date at the end of this year in 2026, be sure to reach out and inquire, and we can see if it's a good fit. I will drop that link in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining me today. I will be back next week with Caitlin doing a joint episode together, and I will talk to you then.